Today, we are putting ourselves right in the heart of high-stakes subterranean strategy. We are plunging into the deep mines of Khazad Dûm, or as history, remembers it, Moria.
And our mission is incredibly focused, but strategically just. So complex. We're tracking a magical thief named Har, who has just gotten his hands on one of the 7 highly coveted dwarven rings of power.
And he's immediately vanished, just gone into the very rock of the mountains.
Our sources for this deep dive are intensely detailed, pulled directly from the field transcripts, detailing the party's immediate strategic session. And this wasn't just a simple chase.
Not at all. The team had to blend real-time logistics, manage their very finite magical resources, and we're talking high-level spells and critical energy reserves, and navigate some pretty profound ethical dilemmas.
All while relying on what? Fragmented lore, and trying to interpret incredibly fast-moving events in a completely unfamiliar environment.
Exactly. We start at the 0 hour, immediately following a conflict that sets this entire mission in motion. The team just witnessed the horrific death of a dwarvish hybrid creature.
And Har had wrenched the ring from her hand, a ring that was, it turned out, actually sustaining her life.
It was, yeah. The sources describe its removal causing her to age rapidly, almost instantly decaying before she perished. Har, using the immense, freshly acquired power of the ring, just vanished into the solid rock.
Leaving the team stunned, facing a dead end, and already racing against the clock.
And before we get into the tactical chase, we absolutely have to unpack a fascinating nugget buried in the source material regarding that dying hybrid.
Right. The thief character, Milo, he managed to register her final, desperate attempt at communication in those last seconds.
Yes. She was a chilling figure, described as a white dwarf creature, extremely pale with this shocking red hair. As she was dying, she was desperately trying to sign a message with her hands.
And Milo, who has the specific expertise from his work in the shadows to read nonverbal cues, he was able to discern 3 distinct things she was trying to convey in that fleeting moment.
2 were pretty obvious and highly emotional. 1 was profound urgency, a warning of the immediate danger. The second was this overwhelming sadness or sorrow over the loss of the ring or, her life.
But the third piece of communication, that's one that stands out. It was utterly distinct and kind of unrelated to the immediate crisis at hand.
Totally unrelated. It was a cryptic piece of information about something else entirely. And this leads us to a compelling piece of anthropological theory presented in the source documents.
Oh, this is fascinating.
It's a brilliant scholarly connection the source notes make. They discuss the long-standing theory that sign language, or hand language, actually predates vocal language in human evolution.
So the idea that we were communicating with gestures before we were making complex sounds?
Precisely. It's an idea that communication was first structured through manual and gestural means before the complex sounds of vocal language developed.
And what's the core evidence they cite? Why is gestural communication considered more fundamental?
Well, it comes down to structural consistency. While spoken languages across the human world vary wildly, think about German versus Japanese versus English in their grammatical structure.
Where they place the verb, the subject, the noun, all of that.
Right, it's all over the place. But hand languages, studied across wildly disparate human cultures, consistently use the exact same structured order. Verb, subject, noun.
Wow. Every single time.
Consistently. That structural uniformity is astonishing. It suggests a much deeper, possibly innate communication pathway, a hardwired structure for transmitting complex ideas that predates the immense variability and flexibility of sound-based vocal language.
So the implication here is profound. In the moment of greatest urgency facing certain death, this dying hybrid reverted to the most fundamental, oldest possible form of communication.
She was, in essence, speaking in a language that might be older than time itself, delivering a crucial yet cryptic piece of unrelated information before she faded.
That detail alone tells you how desperate and how primal the scene was, and it immediately sets up a mystery they know they have to solve later.
That's right. But that historical mystery had to wait, because the modern crisis, the vanishing thief, hard demanded immediate cold logistics and strategic calculation.
Okay, so let's unpack this high-stakes chase and the immediate logistical nightmare they faced. The overriding problem is the adversary's advantage.
A huge advantage. Har now holds one of the 7 dwarven rings of power. This isn't just a fancy jewel. It grants him an incredible mobility advantage, the ability to travel through solid stone.
He's literally swimming through the rock, as the sources describe it.
Yeah, moving at speed without needing to navigate tunnels or terrain, which means in a subterranean environment, conventional travel is completely useless for the heroes.
Har has essentially unlocked the fast-traveled cheat code.
He really has. The party's immediate best guess was that Har was making a direct beeline for the next logical objective, the King's Vault or the King's Hall, where other powerful relics might be stored.
And they estimated this location was about 10 miles away from their current position at the bottom of the chasm they had previously descended.
10 miles, which is a long way underground, especially when your enemy can just ignore all obstacles.
So this distance immediately forced them to pivot on strategy. A long foot march is just.
Yeah.
It's not an option. They had to go for the quickest magical option available.
And the group's first and most potent thought was magic specifically, combining the Arcane Eye spell with the high-level teleport spell. If they could pull it off, they would be at the vault in minutes.
So let's break down that initial, seemingly perfect strategy and understand why it failed. The Arcane Eye. It's a magnificent logistical tool.
It's amazing. It creates an invisible, floating magical sensor that the caster can perceive through, seeing everything the sensor sees. It lasts for 1 hour, which sounds like plenty of time.
And it moves at a respectable speed of 6 miles per hour. The idea was simple. Send the eye ahead, visualize the entire 10-mile route, make the King's Vault location familiar, and then...
poof! Teleport the whole party there.
So why didn't it work?
And here is where the rules of magic clash violently with simple arithmetic. The vault is 10 miles away.
Okay.
At 6 miles per hour, and with a spell duration of exactly 1 hour, the Arcane Eye spell will only reach about 6 miles before the magic evaporates and the sensor vanishes.
Oh, right. The source calculations confirmed this precise limitation. The eye would fade about 6.5 miles into the tunnel.
That is a brutal logistical trap. It wasn't a matter of running out of spell slots or energy. It was a mathematical failure based on the spell's innate range versus duration constraint.
So the eye would fade while the vault was still roughly 3.5 miles away.
Precisely. And because the spell failed to reach and visualize the target destination completely, that destination remained critically unfamiliar.
And that lack of familiarity is the rulebook constraint that immediately blocks the use of the powerful, high-level teleport spell.
You cannot safely teleport to an unfamiliar location without risking a catastrophic, randomized failure like ending up miles away or even splattering against solid rock.
So the quickest, cleanest method was instantly off the table, leaving them stranded and relying on manual travel against a foe who's essentially moving through granite like it's water.
This forced them toward the next quickest alternative, finding speed, even if it meant sacrificing stealth.
Right, which led them to consider using the Conjure Animals spell to summon riding animals. This immediately brought up a whole logistical debate about the size, power, and cost of the summoned beasts.
Right. If you're going to spend a spell slot, you want efficiency. Regular wolves, the challenge rating 14 ones, were deemed far too small to efficiently carry the dwarf and human characters over great distances at speed.
They'd get tired too quickly.
Exactly. They quickly realized they needed to step up to dire wolves, which are challenge rating 1, to accommodate the medium-sized party members and ensure they could sustain the pace.
And the cost of that acceleration. They immediately had to use a higher-level spell slot, increasing the resource expenditure right out of the gate solely because the physical size of their party members demanded bigger mounts.
But the choice of dire wolves, powerful as they are, raised immediate tactical risks in the cramped, uneven tunnels of Moria.
I mean, wait, dire wolves? That sounds utterly terrifying in a confined space. It sounds like they prioritized horsepower over common sense, didn't they?
They absolutely did, and the source transcripts reflect this high-risk gamble. The primary risk came down to control and noise. Nobody in the party was proficient in wolf riding.
Not exactly a common skill.
No. So this meant every time the group moved quickly or encountered treacherous terrain, they had to rely on repeated dexterity checks just to stay mounted and avoid injury.
I recall the wizard arguing that they should have advantage on those checks, right?
Yes. The caster, Lena, she argued that since she specifically created the Fey Spirit direwolves to be cooperative, the rider should have advantage, even assuming that advantage the checks were still frequent and dangerous.
And more importantly, the noise.
Oh, the noise. They realized this rapid movement, even at the direwolves' regular 50-foot speed, let alone daring to dash at 100 feet per round, would generate significant, unavoidable noise.
So they were facing a brutal trade-off. Move slowly and surely, knowing Har would certainly beat them to the vault, or move fast and risk alerting every orc, giant spider, or other horror in the Underdark.
The difficulty of sustaining a dash for 10 miles was just too high, but the necessity of cutting down that estimated 3-day foot journey was paramount.
So they went with the wolves.
They ultimately opted for the wolves at normal speed, relying on the summoned wolf spirit's natural stealth bonus. The necessity of speed ultimately overruled the deep concern for silence. But this tactical decision instantly created a vulnerability, a crack in their plan.
Which, as we were about to see, was exploited almost immediately.
Right. So as the party was still hammering out the final details of this high-risk wolf ride, debating speeds and resources, a figure emerged from the perpetual shadows of the tunnel.
Enter the unexpected and profoundly ambiguous guide, Paco.
He approached them, seemingly out of nowhere, offering his services for a ridiculously steep price. 2,000 gold pieces up front, and another 2,000 upon successful arrival.
4,000 gold pieces for a guide is... That's not a normal fee even in Moria. That's a huge red flag.
A massive red flag. Paco, or sometimes referred to as Guillermo or Taco in the sources, was immediately suspicious. He was using a clearly assumed identity, and yet he seemed to recognize the high-profile party.
He even referenced them being on a game show, a clear reference to a highly publicized past event they'd participated in.
But here's the real nexus of the suspicion. The party immediately deduced that Paco had to be either Har himself or working for him.
Why? Because they recalled that Har had previously eavesdropped on their private conversations about the rings when Har was in a gaseous, undetectable form.
Exactly. Paco's immediate knowing approach suggested he had intimate knowledge of their mission and their identity.
So despite the profound mistrust, they felt they had absolutely no choice.
None. They were facing a potentially 3-day journey over 10 miles of treacherous, unexplored territory against an enemy moving through stone. They concluded resignedly that they ain't gonna get there without help.
The time pressure forced them to accept the possibility of betrayal.
And Paco proved immediately useful. He provided critical, essential knowledge that confirmed their destination was indeed the King's Vault, King's Hall, and he pointed them toward the fastest available route, the legendary King's Highway.
But he also warned them, right?
Crucially, yes. Paco candidly warned them that even by the main road, the journey was a long, tedious, estimated 3-day trek on regular foot travel.
That time estimate, 3 days, was the final nail in the coffin for the slow and steady approach.
It absolutely reaffirmed their decision to spend the higher-level spell slot on the dire wolves to accelerate that journey. They conjured the wolves, spent the crucial resource, and set off, with Paco leading the way on a wolf of his own.
And here we see the logistical error play out in real time. The attempt to force high-speed, mounted travel in confined, treacherous subterranean tunnels plays out exactly as their worst fears predicted.
Despite the advantage granted to the party on their dexterity checks to stay mounted and the wolves' inherent stealth bonus, the repeated need for checks just proved too challenging. The ride was chaotic, loud, and inefficient.
The sources describe the party constantly struggling with the unusual rhythm of the massive dire wolves in narrow passages.
And the critical disruption, the moment the plan shattered, occurred when the dwarf character, Grunther, failed a roll badly and was thrown from his dire wolf.
Oh no.
Yes. Grunther's fall resulted in a massive, unmistakable noise disturbance. His equipment, his valuable mining tools, his heavy shield, and his helmet scattered and clattered down the tunnel,
Creating an auditory beacon that resonated through the deep rock. This was the trigger the underground inhabitants needed.
Paco's response was immediate, frantic, and telling. He jumped off his wolf, frantically instructing the party to get rid of these wolves, man, because there's no space for them where we're going.
And then,
What did he do? He immediately phased through what appeared to be solid rock, revealing a small, rough-hewn cubicle, a secret hideout only known to goblins.
wow. So the party was forced to scramble after him, leaving the valuable direwolf spirits to dissipate back into the ether, completely wasted.
This move confirms two critical things to the party. First, they were right to suspect him. He is not just a common guide. He has intimate, specific knowledge of the deepest, most secure hidden tunnels and evasive maneuvers.
Knowledge that is likely only privy to subterranean inhabitants like the goblins or the orcs.
Exactly. And second, the party realizes that the noise from the fall immediately triggered an alarm only Paco knew how to evade.
So the noise generated by Grunther's fall and scattered gear immediately attracted serious trouble.
Serious trouble. As the party was struggling to follow Paco into the hidden space, two separate parties of orcs, at least four visible from each direction, began approaching rapidly from both the front and the rear.
So they're pinned.
Completely. The initial goal was immediate concealment, which Paco achieved by pulling them into this 10 by 10 foot cubicle situated above the main passageway. But this temporary reprieve immediately escalated into a secondary crisis.
What happened?
The wizard, the Lyric, slipped while scrambling up the opening into the cubicle. He fell a short but brutal 10 feet, hit his head, and suffered a concussion.
Oh, so he's stunned, helpless,
Yeah,
lying directly in the path of the incoming orcs.
right in their path. This required a heroic, split-second intervention that cost time and energy. The strong character, Grunther, had to jump back down to the passage floor, physically retrieve the helpless, concussed wizard, and carry him up into the cubicle.
Narrowly beating the approaching orc vanguard, they were pinned down immediately.
Once inside, the group had a brief moment to strategize as the orcs arrived. And this is where the debate over the use of illusory magic comes into play, highlighting the intense scrutiny of spell rules in high-stakes situations.
The wizard, though concussed, suggested using minor illusion to create a sound diversion 30 feet away. The goal was simple: trick the orcs into thinking the noise came from farther down the tunnel.
But this triggered a deep, crucial rules debate. Did the caster need line of sight to the target location 30 feet away? If he couldn't see the exact spot, could he cast the illusion there?
And the technical answer, according to the sources referencing the strict spell rules, is no.
That's right. Minor illusion simply requires the target location to be within range, meaning within 30 feet. But it specifically does not require the caster to have line of sight.
That's a critical technical distinction for subterranean warfare, allowing the illusionist to cast the sound around a corner, down a hallway, or into an alcove without directly seeing the place.
So they leveraged this loophole. The tactical insight here is that they chose to replicate the exact sound of the falling tools, the clatter of the dwarf's helmet, hoping the orcs would think they had merely overshot the scene of the incident.
And once the orcs were briefly diverted by the illusory sound, the wizard capitalized on their brief protection. Even with his head throbbing, he had the mental presence to cast a much more powerful spell.
Wall of Force, a cube-shaped barrier on the other side of the illusory entrance, thereby completely sealing the cubicle from the main passage.
This was a brilliant, decisive defensive maneuver. We have to pause and stress the tactical significance of Wall of Force. It is immune to non-magical damage.
Invisible, impenetrable. The orcs could not simply hack their way through it with their scimitars. It protected the party from detection, counterattack, and any orcish fire they might have called for.
But the orcs, briefly tricked by the sound, were too knowledgeable about the local terrain. They quickly returned.
And then they did something even more revealing than attacking the wall itself. Since they couldn't breach the invisible wall of force, they began using pickaxes, striking the stone ceiling of the main passage, which was the floor of the party's cubicle.
The steady chicky to the picks. It meant the orcs weren't just guessing. They knew this specific illusionary opening was a common, if secret, goblin hideout.
That's terrifying. It means their supposed secret hiding spot was a known vulnerability in the subterranean network. The party was protected by 2-foot-thick stone, but that wasn't going to last long against dedicated mining.
So just as the first pickaxe point broke through the floor,
Paco reappeared. He hadn't been sitting idle. He reached out from another corner of the 10 by 10 foot space, revealing a second, extremely narrow hidden tunnel described as a 2-foot-like duct leading away.
they had just enough time, scrambling and crawling, to escape the chamber before the orcs could fully breach it.
This sequence underscores, again, the immediate tactical necessity of Paco. Without his unique knowledge of this complex, layered network of secret bolt holes and tunnels, they would have been trapped and potentially killed.
Regardless of the wizard's genius spellcasting.
Exactly. So following the chaotic, exhausting escape, the group finally settled into a small, secure crevice and cast Liamon's tiny hut for a short rest. This allows them to recover magical resources and hit points, which they desperately needed.
And this is where their suspicions about Paco reach a dramatic climax, and the betrayal is effectively confirmed.
Right. Paco refused to stay inside the group's protective, magically secure hut. He scurried off somewhere else and only returned after the rest period was entirely over.
And when he came back,
He had a notable, ugly bruise on his right cheek, clearly visible to the party.
ugh,
The party members immediately concluded that Paco had either been reporting back to his boss, relaying their position and capabilities, or perhaps even worse, had been slapped upside the head for having lost them momentarily.
Or for the logistical error of the dire wolves that had attracted the orcs in the first place.
The final conclusion was inescapable and grim. They were being played. Paco was working for a higher power, likely Hor's organization, and was manipulating their route.
Guiding them toward an eventual ambush, even as he was saving them from immediate death.
This created a profound, high-tension ethical dilemma. Emotionally, the sources indicate the party wanted to stab them and leave him for the orcs.
But cognitively, they recognized that Paco's intimate specialized knowledge of the tunnels was invaluable. They had seen firsthand that they simply could not navigate this orc-infested territory on their own without him.
So they chose to continue using him as their high-priced, morally dubious guide, deciding they would watch him constantly and eliminate him only when he was no longer necessary.
They chose utility over honor in a moment of crisis.
With resources partially recovered from the short rest and their mistrust of Paco cemented, but Paco still alive, the party continued their long march toward the King's Hall.
And this segment of the journey was incredibly tedious and physically demanding. First, 4 miles up the fabled endless stair, and then 2 miles down the massive King's Highway to the first Reed Warden's Hall, and finally into the Khazad Dum city center.
And the source transcripts describe this section not just as a tactical march, but as a deep philosophical interlude. The long, silent, repetitive effort required for repeated stealth checks gave them a lot of time to think.
And we have to give credit to the source material here for providing character color. The dwarf character, Grunther, who was still recovering from his fall, frustratingly kept making noise.
By banging his head against a lintel or dropping his helmet on multiple failed stealth rolls, this constant minor frustration added tension, but also gave them time to converse.
So while they're just marching for miles, they start getting into some really heavy stuff.
They explored multiple perspectives. First, they debated the nature of Har, the thief they were chasing. Was he merely a simple villain driven by greed? Or was he a complex figure committed to a grand, ambitious, almost messianic vision of progress?
Even if that vision was inherently destructive, they drew parallels to figures like the 19th century historical railroad baron.
And the conclusion the party reached was unsettling. They agreed that even if Harsh truly believed he was doing some kind of ultimate good say, bringing civilization to the wasteland, his commitment was so absolute that he was willing to pave over anything and anyone who got in his way.
He transcended simple criminality into something more dangerous, a kind of righteous, self-justified destruction.
Which led naturally to a wider discussion on the banality of evil, a direct reference to Hannah Arendt's concept drawn explicitly from the source material.
For our listener who may not be familiar, Arendt's concept argues that the greatest evils in history are often perpetrated not by raving psychopaths, but by ordinary people who simply adhere to institutional bureaucracy without thinking critically.
So the characters mused on how corruption truly works. It doesn't start with a dramatic evil pact. It starts insidiously, often with small, seemingly benign compromises, cheating on taxes, small acts of selfishness, or simply following orders without question,
Before escalating into profound systemic evil.
They connected this specifically to the origins of the Nazgul, men who were once powerful, honorable kings, but were slowly and secretly corrupted by Sauron's influence through the rings over time. The evil was best served gradually and deceptively.
The spectrum of morality was further explored when discussing the ancient destruction of Moria itself. The characters debated the role of the Balrog, the flame of Udun, who slaughtered during the Sixth.
Right. The Balrog is often considered the ultimate monster, the singular cause of the kingdom's fall. However, the party, relying on ancient lore, concluded that the Balrog's attack was driven by the dwarves having dug too deep.
They weren't just mining ore. They had invaded the entity's original established territory, a place where it slept or rested.
The Balrog saw the dwarves not as miners, but as existential invaders engaged in catastrophic environmental destruction.
So the party concluded that from the Balrog's perspective, her violent catastrophic actions, the slaughter of the king and the destruction of the kingdom, were entirely justified as an act of self-defense.
Which forces a challenging perspective on the listener. Can a destructive entity be morally right, even if its actions lead to utter catastrophe?
And finally, the conversation shifted to an uncomfortable critique of modern societal structures, seeing echoes of Middle-earth's corporate states in their own world.
Yeah, the source transcripts indicate a strong critique of populism and the corporate state, arguing that the true voter or decision-maker in the modern world isn't the citizen, but the lobbyist and the large corporation.
The characters argued that political parties, regardless of affiliation, ultimately served this elite class by manufacturing chaos and division among the general populace. They saw this division as a classic psychological poison.
It's a moment of deep cynicism born from the desperation of their underground mission.
After traversing miles of tunnels while processing these incredibly heavy themes, the group finally reached the core of the Dwarven kingdom, the King's Hall at the very center of Khazad-dûm.
And the sight was immediately disconcerting. Unlike the outer areas of Moria, this hall had been left remarkably untouched by the orcs, but it was profoundly ruined by a much older, massive devastation.
The physical evidence lay everywhere. Dwarf skeletons were scattered in defensive positions, and the mighty ancestral throne of Durin was toppled and heavily scorched from a gigantic blast of ancient fire.
But the trauma was not just physical. Upon entering the central hall, the party was seized by a shared traumatic vision. They saw Durin the Sixth and his retainers gathered, armed and ready, only for the door to burst inward,
Revealing the true cause of the ruin, the flame of Udun.
The vision was visceral and horrifying. It detailed the Balrogs storming into the chamber, breathing and lashing fire, instantly slaughtering the Dwarven king and all his guards in a single cataclysmic act.
This confirmed, beyond ancient legend, the Balrogs' direct role in the initial total collapse of the kingdom.
As the vision subsided and the party processed the trauma, those members who succeeded on their perception rolls felt a familiar, chilling, crawly sensation return, a feeling they had previously experienced during one of their short rests.
This was the second time this distinct coldness had swept over them.
This prompted the immediate use of a locate object spell, targeting the specific dwarven ring that Har had stolen, hoping to confirm his proximity.
And here is the chilling reveal.
The spell confirmed that the cold, evil sensation was not being caused by the specific dwarven ring they were chasing,
Which raised the deeply unsettling possibility that the energy was radiating from an entirely different, powerful, and malevolent entity, perhaps the second ring they were chasing, or worse, something much darker.
an unseen power moving beneath them, perhaps Har's ultimate boss.
Finally, the wizard used his advanced logistical tool, the Gem of Seeing, to search the opulent, untouched private quarters of the hall. He discovered a hidden wall bearing a cryptic riddle.
I am an odd number standing alone. Divide me by 3, 1 remains, 1 shows.
And behind the riddle, after solving the puzzle, they found a hidden closet containing 2 small, dusty, ring-sized boxes.
And these boxes were not ordinary wood or metal. They were lined with a combination of lead and mithril.
This is a crucial piece of dwarven lore technology we need to explore for the listener. Why lead and mithril?
It's a genius piece of dwarven counter-magic engineering. We know that the rings of power are notoriously dangerous and insidious. Lead is the classic counter-magic material, designed to block magical detection.
So the lead lining functions as a counter-magic shield, specifically designed to block detection spells like locate object. If they store the rings inside, they become invisible to magical tracking.
And the mithril likely serves 2 functions. It enhances the structural integrity and counter-magic properties of the lead. But more importantly, it helps protect the wearer or handler from the insidious corruption that leaks from the rings, even when they are stored.
These boxes were designed to safely contain ultimate power and prevent the dwarves themselves from being tempted.
So they resolved to take these empty, lead-lined boxes with them. This showed immense foresight, preparing them for the safe transport of the rings they hoped to recover.
And acknowledging the risks associated with merely carrying such powerful, corrupting artifacts. The stage is now perfectly set. They have reached the King's Hall, acquired protective gear, gained critical historical context, and most importantly, confirmed that a second, unseen, powerful threat is also moving within the depths of Moria.
What an incredible deep dive into logistics, ethics, and ancient history. We tracked the team from the immediate aftermath of the theft, seeing them navigate the dead ends of the arcane eye spell limitations and the hazards of the reckless dire wolf ride.
They were forced to utilize a morally questionable guide in Paco, endure the close shave of the orc ambush, and recover precious resources via short rests, all leading to their discovery of the ruined city center.
This deep dive truly emphasizes the importance of applied knowledge and understanding limitations when resources are scarce. The failure of the arcane eye at 6.5 miles was a logistical choke point that meant manual travel was unavoidable.
And the inherent constraints of mounted travel, underground wolf fatigue, and noise led directly to the orc encounter, forcing them to abandon resources. And the tactical genius of the Wall of Force, using a major resource they thought they might need later, was the only thing that saved them from being overwhelmed, proving that sometimes defense is the highest form of offense.
And their willingness to engage with the ethical complexity of their situation, using a clearly compromised guide like Paco, and acknowledging the moral ambiguity of even the Balrog's destructive motivation, showed true strategic maturity.
They are not merely heroes following a single moral compass, they are pragmatists dealing with hard truths.
Exact.
But let's close on the chilling realization they made in the King's Hall. That cold, crawly sensation that twice swept over the party was confirmed not to be the specific ring they are chasing.
Which means, if that feeling represents a powerful evil entity, perhaps Har's boss, or Sauron himself, or a Balrog's lingering immense influence, it means there is an invisible threat moving beneath the characters.
One they cannot locate and one they have failed to perceive twice now.
It raises the terrifying question, what power does this hidden entity wield? And how will the party track the immediate visible threat of Har while protecting themselves from an invisible, immensely powerful entity whose presence they can only detect through a lingering sense of cold they cannot localize?
They're facing a tactical mission with a metaphysical threat. What compromise, what ethical boundary will the party have to cross to survive its presence and still complete their mission?
Something for you to mull over until next time.
That's all for this deep dive into the high-stakes strategy and logistics of Khazad-dûm. We'll be back soon with more insights from the cutting edge of lore and high fantasy tactics. Thank you for joining us.